Thanks as well for everyone for keeping to time. This makes my life easier. Our next speaker today is Nick Rigby. Nick has been employed by the HSE for more than a third of a century, and that's quite a statement. And it's a fact that he still finds amazing and scary in equal measure. He's principal inspector and has spent much of his career managing operational inspection and investigation teams in mostly the construction and manufacturing sectors. He's personally managed some of the HSE's largest investigations, including that into the deaths of over 200 patients whilst in the care of the Mid-Staffs NHS Trust, which Phil alluded to this morning, and into the crash on the Smiler ride at Alton Towers, which resulted in permanently disabling injuries to many young people. For the last 6 years, he's been responsible for delivering the HSE's international work in support of its fellow health and safety regulators around the world. So, Nick, thanks for joining us, and I'll let you share your presentation, and we'll enjoy the next session.
Yeah, thanks very much there. Can you hear me?
Yes, no problem at all.
Excellent, right. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Make sure I can share my screen, which I'm not sure I can at the moment. Can you see my presentation at all?
Yeah, it's just coming up in behind the Teams window that you've got there. Yeah.
Okay, let's.
And there we go.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Big sigh of relief, and a big thank you to James, the previous speaker, for sort of teeing up the role of data, because that's where I'm going to be concentrating my presentation on. So thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's conference. As said, I'm a principal inspector with the Health and Safety Executive, or HSE. And what I'd like to do for the next half hour or so is to share with you some of the work which HSE has been doing alongside the Lloyds Foundation under the banner of Discovering Safety. Now, as the strapline on the slide shows, the Discovering Safety programme is very closely linked to the aim of securing real health and safety benefits for everyone in the workplace by the way in which we can use data far more effectively than it has been used to date. So what is the Discovering Safety programme? How does it work? Why should you want to get directly involved in it yourselves? It's a very large and extremely ambitious scientific endeavour, if you like, funded by the Lloyds Foundation, delivered by HSE and its key partners, but it goes way beyond simply being a scientific and academic exercise, as I hope I'll be able to demonstrate to you. Now, I'm a health and safety professional. Indeed, it would be very strange if an HSE principal inspector wasn't, and I have been, as said, for more than a third of a century now, and that's starting to feel like quite a long time. Much has improved over that period, and even more has changed. New standards, legislation, new ways of working, and indeed totally new industries which hadn't even been thought about when I started out on my HSE career back in the 80s. Buses fueled by hydrogen. Wow, that's quite something really when you think back to how I would have approached the industrial world back in the 1980s. Yet still, even now, as all of us know, too many people go to work in the morning and never return home to their families. Or if they do, then they have far too often suffered sometimes appalling harm through the injuries or illnesses they've received whilst they've been at work. Can any of us actually dare to imagine a working world where that simply doesn't happen anymore? Where people aren't killed or injured or suffer disease through their work, where we have really harnessed the sophisticated tools which are at our disposal to both predict, but more importantly, prevent those awful events from occurring. And the Discovering Safety programme is right at the very heart of that ambition, if you like. Data and the use to which we put it is the key to unlocking a significant part of that ambition. I would like to spend a few minutes sharing with you some of the projects being undertaken under the umbrella of the Discovering Safety programme to demonstrate the thinking and the direction of that work. I'm going to be touching upon 5 of the specific projects within Discovering Safety, And hopefully that will be enough to give you a taste of the areas they're exploring and the potential which lie behind them. Some of those areas are interlinked. Some rely on progress being made in one area before another can move forward. But hopefully that will become clear to you as I introduce the projects. I should say right now that details of all the projects I'll be touching on, and indeed the whole of the wider programme, can be found on the Discovering Safety website, and you'll see the site address on my final slide. Perhaps if we start by having a look at the Predicting Risk project. Essentially, this early project sought to test the lay of the land, to try and establish just how feasible it is to deploy off-the-shelf predictive analytic tools and apply them to the huge array and range of data which currently gets collected under the banner of workplace health and safety. It took the form of a pilot study. It involved BAM Nuttall, a construction company, and a couple of University of Oxford spin-off companies with expertise in semantic technologies and machine learning, phrases I had never even heard when I joined HSE all those years ago. Being a pilot study, of course, it had to be testing something. In this case, it was asking these 4 questions. Firstly, was it actually possible to bring together a suitable data set built around the normal health and safety data which is generated by organizations, and could that be used in a predictive analytic exercise? Secondly, was it possible to take that raw data, which all businesses are busily collecting, sometimes with a known purpose, but all too often without, and to build this predictive model, which was able to predict health and safety endpoints of interest with a sufficient level of accuracy? Now, it's all well and good producing some outputs which come pouring out of such a model. The third question was therefore trying to establish whether, having done so, those predictive outputs could be communicated in a way which actually added a tangible value in the real world, where decisions and actions have to be implemented to save real lives and prevent real injuries and disease. And of course, this sounds all fine and dandy for particularly sophisticated organizations, but would those tools be able to be used successfully by organizations which didn't necessarily have that level of data science and data analytic expertise? If it can't be deployed as a tool that most businesses could use to predict risk, then what would be the real point of it? Whilst wanting to move data analytics knowledge forward, Discovering Safety is really looking for the real outputs from those advances, those which can be of real and tangible benefit to businesses who are currently exposing their respective workforces to those real risks. So what did the pilot find? Well, it was able to demonstrate that yes, predictive analytic techniques could indeed be successfully used in health and safety contexts to predict future endpoints. A big tick in the box. The concept is there. But why is that important? Because the pilot found that the process crucially allowed that knowledge to be presented in ways which were capable of influencing business strategy, which in turn was able to promote more proactive and preventative health and safety practices. It actually had a tangible endpoint that was of benefit. This was not simply an academic exercise. This was a very important early step in improving our understanding of the potential which health and safety data has locked up within it. Let me share with you another example, this time relating to a very real and potentially explosive example, in the very real sense of the word explosive. One of the projects being conducted under the Discovering Safety programme is looking at the better use of data to inform the process industries when considering the risks from loss of containment. Primary containment in the process industry sector is all about ensuring that flammable or toxic materials are kept within the vessels, tanks, and associated pipework where they're supposed to be kept, that they don't suddenly do a Crocodile Dundee and unexpectedly go walkabout where they're not wanted. Loss of such primary containment can result in fires, explosions, toxic releases, with the very significant potential to harm large numbers of workers and indeed off-site public, as well as the wider environment. And these can be very significant events. The Buncefield explosion and fires in 2005 resulted from a loss of containment due to the overfilling of a storage tank. Whilst very fortunately, perhaps even miraculously, in that instance there were no fatalities, the incident caused an estimated £1 billion worth of damage to the economy. Other loss of containment incidents around the world, such as in Bhopal in India in 1984, caused the deaths either directly or indirectly of many thousands of innocent people. The purpose of this project is to consider the extent to which data held on numerous loss of containment incidents can be used collectively to develop better insights into the causes and circumstances of those events for the benefit of the whole of the wider process industry. There is absolutely no value to that wider industry of HSE simply sitting on its own data relating to its investigations of such incidents, which is carried out over many, many years. Likewise, many organisations will have data on their own incidents, which, if they were allowed to be shared more widely, could provide greater understanding of the risks and the relevant mitigating precautions for the benefit of everyone. The intention, therefore, was to start by extracting insight from HSE's own regulatory intelligence datasets, and to then collaborate with other both public and private organisations around the world to augment that data. Now, we could, of course, as the government regulator, try and extract more information from industry by simply imposing some new data collection requirements on them. We'll set a new law, you will provide us, and therefore we've got more information. The problem with that approach is that we know from bitter experience that it's simply burying a time-poor industry under more and more requirements to submit data. Simply doesn't work. What this project aims to do instead, and what really stands it apart, is its objective of using data analytic techniques which are capable of gleaning insight from currently totally unstructured data, such as a free text report, or from those which have been created for a myriad of other purposes. It's very difficult to extract data if it hasn't been built in the right way in the first place. The next project is very close to my heart. I've spent a significant part of my third of a century in HSE working with the construction industry. Right at the start of my presentation, I asked you to imagine a working world where high-risk incidents could be predicted and therefore prevented. This particular project supports the construction industry in the collection and analysis of intelligence on health and safety lead indicators, those things which point towards something which hasn't happened but which may happen in the future. The alternative, of course, is to carry on doing what so many organisations do, not only in construction, which is simply to measure their failures by counting all the lagging indicators. Or in other words, how many times they got something wrong. Wrong enough that people were hurt, or even worse, by which time you can count as many things as you like, but those people won't be going home to their families at the end of their working day. It's too late. We all know that businesses, and construction businesses are no different from any other in this respect, collect an incredible amount of data on what they do, whether that's counting RIDDO reportable injuries or the scores they give themselves during their in-house safety inspections. They are not short of data. There is plenty of it around. But is it the right data, capable of assisting the prediction and therefore the prevention of an incident? Or is it simply counting the body bags and the amputations and the numbers of people who've died this year from workplace exposure to asbestos, for example? This particular project commenced in 2019 with a study aimed at developing a practical framework for the use of these leading indicators during construction projects. It's now moved on, working with representative companies from the construction industry itself to consider the real practical issues relevant to the deployment of that framework onto live sites. And in the final and current phase, it's examining how the tools which stem out of the work could now be used much more widely across the industry. Hopefully you're beginning to recognise that this programme is starting with some fairly fundamental questions about whether or not the data which we all know is out there can actually be harnessed to improve real health and safety performance. I'm sure that none of you at all will be surprised to learn that HSE itself captures an incredibly large amount of data each year, which relates to real risk in real workplace situations. Just imagine the volume of information which sits behind those numbers on the screen right now. Around 80,000 RID or incident reports are sent to HSE every year, with so much information about the sector and the issues which caused real harm to a real person in a real workplace embedded within that information. This is gold standard information which should not be allowed to simply sit in a file somewhere unused, except for whenever it or whatever action HSE chooses to take against the relevant parties involved in that incident at that particular point in time. Around 20,000 HSE inspection reports every year, 20,000 this year, last year, the year before, and the year before, etc. And around 3,000 actual investigations. HSE's inspectors out there on site gathering even more information. You will all know as well that on top of that mountain of valuable information pouring into HSE each year, industry itself will be collecting even more, a lot more. It has to be obvious, doesn't it, that within that mountain of information, there must be hidden away some incredibly useful insights into workplace risk and what is needed to prevent it materializing, if only somehow it could be extracted. But of course, it isn't quite so easy as that, as I'm sure you can recognize. One of the barriers or obstacles to making the best use of that data is often the commercial sensitivity of such information, or the need to protect the anonymity of those it refers to ensure compliance with, say, data protection requirements. These are real barriers, which could be key factors determining the willingness or otherwise of many of those organizations to share their health and safety data within their own organization, within their wider industry sector, and certainly with the regulator such as HSE. This particular project under Discovering Safety recognizes and responds to that significant challenge. It's looking for innovative, effective, and particularly automated techniques which are capable of desensitizing and anonymizing health and safety information, which would give those who hold it currently sufficient confidence to be able to share it more widely for the greater good. Just dare to imagine what access to all of that information could bring in respect of high value knowledge about real risk in those real workplaces I keep talking about. The project's being led by HSE alongside an organization known as OHALO, as per the logo on the slide. The final project I want to touch upon is the Construction Risk Library. Again, one which is very close to my heart and probably the closest, as I'm the technical lead on this particular project. The construction world, certainly at the top end, is moving forward at a great pace. Here in the UK, we've had safety legislation in place since the mid-90s, known as the Construction Design and Management Regulations, better known as CDM, which for the first time placed duties on designers to design as much risk as possible out of the structures they are tasked with designing by the clients or developers, those who are clearly eager to get the maximum architectural impact and value from the money they're spending on their projects. But that brings real challenges. How does the construction design process work 21 years into the century? How would a construction designer, normally sitting behind a BIM screen in a probably quite comfortable office, really gain an understanding of the risks which are faced by contractors out there on live construction sites? And more importantly, how would they know what options they have open to them to eliminate those risks from that project at source during that design phase? We now understand far better than we ever did before just what impact good design can have on the level of residual risk which a contractor has to manage on a construction project. It probably shouldn't need saying, but I tend to say it quite often anyway. If you can remove a risk at source by good design before a single clod of earth has been moved on the site, then that's one risk which the contractor doesn't have to worry about at all. That risk doesn't exist on that site. And that's what the design aspects of CDM is trying to encourage, trying to require, where risk is removed from the whole process. And it's this approach which is a large part of the perhaps incredible success which the UK construction industry has had, and which currently makes us the envy of the developed world when it comes to construction health and safety performance. And let me give you a quick example of that, which hopefully you will all recognise. Back in 2012, London hosted the Olympic Games. It was hailed as a great success. We had a wonderful few days, as I'm sure you can remember, with amazing achievements being realised. But one of the biggest of those achievements didn't happen on the track or the pool or the cycling in the velodrome. It actually happened over the 5 or so years that it took to transform what was a previously derelict, contaminated, and very neglected part of the East End of London into the gleaming stadia and all the incredible associated structures and infrastructure which the whole world saw on their TV screens. For the first time, we hosted a major event where the construction work for it was undertaken under this new CDM approach, where designers had a responsibility to eliminate or minimize construction risk in their designs. The thing you don't normally see when you're watching an Olympics or a World Cup or a similar event is the death and injury toll of the workers tasked with constructing the wonderful structures you see on your screen. The construction work for the London Olympics involved around 80 million working hours without one single fatality. Not one. This was the first time ever anywhere in the world that an event of that scale had been constructed without the loss of a single life. An incredible achievement, no podium, no gold medal involved, but an incredible achievement just the same. So we know that good construction design can work and can save lives and prevent injuries. But back to my brief here, just what has that got to do with data and the use that we put it to? Well, designers aren't born with an understanding of construction risk or of the various options they have available to them to eliminate or mitigate those risks through the design decisions they take. And different designers and different contractors will have adopted different approaches to their work and may have done it just like that for many, many years. Some of it will have been extremely successful in eliminating risk. But too often that learning then sits in their own little silo, beautifully cocooned and protected from any risk of it being shared with the wider design and construction world. What this particular project seeks to do is to provide designers and contractors with the very best knowledge available that is currently locked away within those silos. And HSE doesn't escape the net here either. We, along with the wider construction industry and design industry, hold huge amounts of information on the thousands, indeed probably tens of thousands of accidents we've investigated over the years, and which is locked away in files in numerous different formats, which can range from free text reports, handwritten, possibly by myself back in the 1980s, to a multiple number of different formats of often redundant computer filing systems. This project seeks to unlock the potential risk knowledge which is hidden away in those silos and seeks to use software to share that knowledge directly with designers into the systems which they are already using in their day-to-day work. Even if they have never personally come across a particular risk issue themselves previously, by harnessing this collective knowledge, opening up the silos and embedding it within the systems which are already out there, already being used by those designers today, they can be provided with the information to say, hang on, you're proposing to design that beam to fix to that column in that location in your BIM design. But in doing so, have you realized you've just introduced a new risk specific to your design of, say, a possible fall from an open edge? Integrating this risk knowledge into the BIM design process has the potential to eliminate so much of the risk which currently exists when a design is handed over to a contractor by the designer. Now, a key part of this particular project, and an area which will become even more important to this and indeed several of the other projects as the program moves forward, is its community of practice. The coming together of as many interested parties who work in this area as possible to openly share with each other their ideas, their successes, and indeed, probably far more importantly, their failures of designing risk out of the construction process. Which very sweetly brings me on to the final topic, how and why you may want to become involved in discovering safety for yourself. HSE does not have all of the answers, all of the solutions here. whilst we hold an incredible amount of information on workplace risk, going back over the nearly 200 years that we've had a health and safety regulator here in the UK, we don't know everything. If discovering safety is really going to achieve its potential to truly harness the knowledge which we believe is currently siloed away in the various cubbyholes in which it resides, both within HSE and within wider industry, we need more people to become involved. We need you to become involved. If you haven't had a look inside Discovering Safety to date, then please accept my invitation to do so. The website address is there at the bottom. I invite you all to just dare to imagine, just for a little while, just what the working world could actually look like if all of that potential could be unlocked from all this data and knowledge which is currently hidden away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. This is a project, I think, which no one can disagree with, because you're really pushing against open doors here to try and share information and data that's been, as you say, locked away for so long and across so many different industries even. Okay, let me open up the floor as usual then to anyone who wants to ask something or to pick up on any points that Nick has raised first. Anyone want to kick off there?
Good response. I like that.
Yeah.
I shall have a sip of coffee.
No.
Okay, I'm going to keep the conversation going then. So.
Yeah, go on then, Tony. Yeah, thank you.
I guess there is a positive that's come out of COVID, and I'll use that term loosely. Within the NHS, with the rollout of Teams almost as a standard operating tool now for conversations such as this, off the back of that, we got access to Power BI. And we've started to operate at pace with that within our organisation, rolling out information systems, but also comparing data from one stream to another because of its interrelation. Nick, I have emailed Discovering Safety a couple of times and haven't had a response. So I'd like an offline conversation if possible. And I've sent a couple of tweets as well about engaging, just to share our direction of travel to see whether it's in the right direction or if we've missed anything.
Absolutely fine. Yes, I've taken a note of your name. I occasionally, when I have the option to do so, I can log in and find out who's been contacting, who's asking to access the system. It's quite for the first time in my life, I've had access to the backside of a website, if you like, and a members area within it. And I'm astonished by how many Russian bots in particular wish to try and join Discovering Safety under all sorts of various descriptions and names. So we do have a filtering process. I can't believe that you've been filtered out because of that, and I'm not suggesting that. But I will
just switch my camera on so you know I'm real.
I'll definitely drop in and have a look later today, Anthony. Yeah.
No problem. Thanks for that. Cheers.
But you raise a really important point. That data, we've collected data for donkey's years related to health and safety, and the trouble is it's been in so many different formats, and we do a little bit with it, and then it gets put away, and then nothing ever happens to that. And the whole Discovering Safety program is about looking at the potential for opening that up again. Yes, we may have written a report on a particular accident 30 years ago when I first joined HSE. Is there a nugget of information there which can be joined with other nuggets together to actually provide insight? And can we harness some software tools, new techniques, use the innovation, which now enables my free text report, which I hand wrote 30 years ago, to be dealt with in exactly the same way as a computer record that was generated yesterday, and bring all that information together. And that's what part of the Discovering Safety program is allowing us to do. It's allowing us to explore the options to realize that real potential.
Yeah, I guess the other bit, Nick, and I don't know if you've had sight of this, but the new NHS instant reporting systems using algorithms and artificial intelligence to read instance, that'll be coming online over the next year. We've been piloting it as an organisation, so I can have that conversation with yourselves as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
Thanks, Tony. Thank you. I'm intrigued when you talk about closing the loop with the lessons learned. I mean, this is even just beyond health and safety. This is an issue in terms of any type of projects trying to actually re-embed lessons learned. People do lessons learned sessions and capture information and then file it away. Is there any sort of novel or innovative things that you've come across already, Nick, which are ways in which you can almost automate the way in which lessons learned from this data can be put real time into back into the design process or back into the project process?
Certainly the construction risk library fits that beautifully. I mean, what we are aiming to do, I've spent a lot of time in construction. I was around when CDM was first introduced, and designers faced a very steep learning curve, because in the past we had the old situation, someone had a load of money and said, I want a juicy big building, and it's got to look fantastic, and you know what, I want it built for as little money as I can possibly get away with, and I want it built very quickly. Designer, go and do it. Designer sat in his silo, produced a design with giving very little thought at that time to how that thing was actually going to be put together by the construction companies. And they simply handed it across. They passed from one silo to the next, and the contractors they took ownership of all that risk. And often it was not possible to actually construct that building safely with the design that they'd been given and the constraints which apply to it, both financial and time. And CDM changed that picture, and we now get designers who use their BIM systems, which allow them to look at everything in 3D and even 4D. We can introduce time into the process in front of them on the screen as well. And what the Construction Risk Library project aims to do is to say to a designer, when you're making a key decision within your BIM process, there are other options. You've chosen to do it one way. The system will flag up, do you know what, there are other options to do that better. We've learned from the fact that if you use a smaller block or a block with a lower proportion of silica within it, we can reduce particular risks associated with that work. Now, often designers would never have been aware of that. They had designed in that way for 10, 20, 30 years. That was simply the way they did it. And unless they get introduced to these different approaches, which is what BIM allows them to do, they would just carry on doing the same, and those same risks are having to be managed by the construction companies. So I think BIM and the Construction Risk Library project really lends itself to that, where you can see real change in the design process as a result of what is going to be coming out of that particular project.
Yeah. Okay. Any other points anyone wants to make or question Nick about what's really would really be required of any organization who wants to get involved? What would be the expectations upon them?
I mean, if you are interested, go and have a look on the website. You can look around the website without joining up, but there is a members area, quite a simple login process. I will explore why Tony didn't manage to get in himself when he's contacted us. But it is a fairly straightforward one. And once you're in, you can then access all the projects and the data behind those projects to your heart's content. And we want you to be involved, which is currently going through the process of developing a discussion forum for the Construction Risk Library. So you will be able to introduce your own topic threads that you want to open up to discuss with other interested parties around the country and indeed around the world, because we've got many international members as well.
And you touched on it in the presentation, Nick, but I'd imagine that's one of the first things people will then ask, which is around the confidentiality of data. And we do a lot of collaborative work involving a number of partners with data, and confidentiality is important in that. What's the measures that are put in place, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I said right at the very start of the presentation about the interlinking between various projects undertaken within the program, and the old Halo one, which is looking at how we can apply an automated system to desensitize and anonymize data so that organizations become far more comfortable in sharing information with the program, is going to be a really important one, because otherwise people will constantly come across that barrier. They'll say, we can't share that data because it names people. We don't want to give commercially sensitive information away, and they just won't do it. Therefore, we're losing that opportunity. So whilst it's a small project under the overall program, it's actually a really important one. And if we can crack that, then that really will open the doors to a whole load of new information coming in. The more information we can get, the more insights we will be able to discover by linking up all these various data sources.
So maybe in the future it's a case of the default is you opt in and then you have to opt out. Okay, anybody else want to pick up on a point for Nick? Okay. Okay, well, thanks very much, Nick. And yeah, you've given everyone the website there, so that's good. We can connect through. Yep. Okay, thanks very much for your input there. Thank you.